Today we're diving into a huge environmental story unfolding in India, and it's all about one of the world's oldest mountain ranges. Believe it or not, a single decision here could totally change North India's air, its water, and its entire future. This is the Aravalli crisis.
So let me ask you a question. What on earth could possibly connect a massive, sprawling desert with the air you breathe in one of the world's biggest cities? Well, the answer is an ancient mountain range that's standing right in between them.
To really get what's at stake here, we first have to understand why this ancient green wall, is so unbelievably important. Now, this is not just some line of hills on a map. We're talking about the Aravalli Range, a nearly 700-kilometer-long spine of rock and forest. It's a living barrier that has literally shaped North India's climate and its landscape for millennia.
Okay, think of its job in three parts. First, it's a shield, physically holding back the Thar Desert from swallowing up more land. Second, it's a giant sponge, soaking up all those monsoon rains to refill the groundwater that millions of people depend on. And third, it's an air filter, catching dust and pollution before it can choke cities like Delhi. You take that away, and North India becomes a much, much tougher place to live.
So keeping in mind just how critical this range is, let's get to the decision that kicked off this whole controversy. It all comes down to a new rule and a single number. 100 meters. That's it. This number right here is at the very heart of this entire debate, and you're about to see why it has such enormous implications. So here's what happened. India's Supreme Court accepted a new definition proposed by the government. From now on, a hill has to be at least 100 meters high to be officially considered part of the Aravalli Range. The government says, hey, this just creates a clear scientific standard for everyone. But it's not quite that simple. And as you can imagine, this new rule has kicked off a fierce debate. It's basically pitting environmental activists against the government. Let's break down what each side is saying. So you've got two totally different ways of looking at this. The activists are arguing that an ecosystem doesn't care about a 100-meter cutoff. Those smaller hills, the ones under 100 meters, are just as vital for forests and for water. They're worried this opens the door to a flood of mining and construction that could cause permanent damage. Now, the government, on the other hand, says this is just a clarification. They assure everyone that over 90% of the area is still protected, and they promise to stay tough on any illegal mining. And this quote from the Environment Minister, Bhupender Yadav, really sums up the government's official line. The promise is clear. Action against illegal mining isn't stopping. The goal, they say, is simply to create a clear, uniform standard, not to weaken protection.
Of course, an issue this big doesn't just stay in the courtroom. It's become political. Fast. Opposition parties are now questioning the government's real motives, and at the same time, environmental groups are pushing hard for a formal legal review. This is now a full-blown public debate. Now, with all of this back and forth, you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but why should this matter to me? Well, let's connect the dots directly from these hills to our everyday lives. Because look, every time this natural barrier gets weaker, more dust and more pollutants have a straight shot into our cities. It is, quite literally, about the air that you and I breathe. And it's also about the water you drink. The Aravallis are a massive groundwater recharge zone. If we compromise them, we could be threatening the water supply for millions and millions of people.
When you put it all together, what this is really about is the long-term health of our cities. The decisions we make today will decide just how clean and how livable these places will be for generations to come. And here's the trickiest part about environmental damage. You don't always see it right away. The real consequences of what's decided today, those will be felt in 10, 20, or maybe even 30 years from now. Which brings us to the final, and really the most fundamental question at the heart of this entire issue. It's a question about balance, and it's a question about the kind of future we want to build.
This statement just says it all, doesn't it? For thousands of years, this mountain range has been our silent protector. But now, the roles have completely reversed. The Aravalli Range itself needs protection. From us.
You know, the debate is always framed as development versus the environment, as if you have to choose one. But maybe the real question we should be asking is this. Can India find a way to have both? A path to progress that doesn't sacrifice the very ecosystems that keep us alive? Is that balance even possible? That's the challenge that lies ahead.